Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Chat. I'm Krista Harmon, a workforce development consultant with the Kent ISD, and I'm so happy to have Marisa Vinsky with us today. She's an attorney. Welcome, Marisa.
Thank you. I'm very excited to talk about my job that I love.
Well, good. Well, here at Career Chats, we just love to start with the same question every time, honestly. We love to know, when you were 16 or 17, did you think you would grow up to be an attorney? What were those early thoughts?
Yeah, so I think I'm actually a rare case where I've known I wanted to be attorney since first grade. It was something that's never wavered. Now, the question of what type of attorney I went back and forth, but really my path through high school, taking law classes in high school. My mom took me on a field trip to go to court in high school just because she knew it was what I was interested in. We just popped into a courtroom, sat down, and watched what was going on. Into undergrad and taking classes specifically for the law field, doing a pre-law fraternity, and then going into law school right after. So that's something that I kind of did my school trajectory with that in mind, knowing I wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah, that is pretty rare. And it's fun to meet someone like you. I also from 17 knew what I wanted and never wavered. I'd love to know, when you think back to your childhood though, Marissa, was it a TV show? Did you know someone who's a lawyer? Where did that initial thought come from way back then in first grade?
I think that it's always a great question. I don't have any immediate family members who were lawyers. My mom will say it's because I like to argue, but that's just something she says. But I love to talk. And then like crime shows and investigation shows were something that just always piqued my interest. But I didn't think I would ever do it from the prosecution standpoint. I was pretty much defense all the way. I thought there was a lot of injustice going on in our criminal system, and I could make more positive changes through the defense side. So I would just say that's just where my interest led. I'm very into politics and reading what's going on in the world, and that's where I felt that I could make the most difference.
Yeah, and I love that you have pointed out some of your values already, because that's something I really hope our career chats help young people hear the different values and they start to kind of self-assess. And being interested in politics, seeing that injustice in the world, wanting to be part of the solution, those are common values, I would assume. And we'll dig into some more of that. So you knew you want to be a lawyer, so obviously good grades was going to be important. So that helped you stay pretty focused in high school. Share some of that experiences of just education for high school level.
Yeah, so I will say the legal field, they do really value grades. Now, once you get into the professional aspect of it, they really don't care anymore. But for school wise, getting into law schools, getting into undergrad, they do really focus on that. So because I knew it was a priority, I didn't let it stop me from having fun with my friends or anything like that. But I just knew, okay, I need to set aside this time. Thankfully, school is something that did come naturally to me. I love learning. I think I'm just a natural learner, but law school's hard, undergrad's hard. You have to put in that work. So I would just make clear boundaries. Okay, I'm studying tonight. I also like studying with groups. So I would find a few friends who were in the same classes as me. Law school, you learn a lot about outlines, so borrowing outlines from other people in classes and going off that, but really finding a community of people who had the same values and we're like, okay, we want to do well on this test. Let's do it together. That's really good to have that support.
What a great nugget right off the top here for young people to know they don't have to do it alone, and to find people who have similar values, like you said, and build that community of studying. I love that. That's so great. How did you know what undergrad you would choose then? Because I know there's some variety that you can kind of go for. Young people get anxious about that first step of college. So help us kind of what your thinking was.
Yeah, so the application process for undergrad, it was a lot. It could be overwhelming at times because you just look and you're like, the world is my oyster. I have so many options. Some people choose schools because they focus specifically on they're number one in the country for this area. I didn't really have to focus on that just because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. So what I really focused on is schools that would provide me with scholarships because I wouldn't be able to financially afford college on my own. So my one of my main priorities was really looking and seeing what schools have good scholarships that can support me. That's actually how I ended up going to Central Michigan, was because I was able to get the Centralis scholarship and get a full ride there. And then when I, focused on Central, I was like, okay, they have extracurricular activities that I think could support me and help me network, the pre-law fraternity. I was in Palms in high school. And so that's something I wanted to continue in undergrad. But then also I went on a tour and I met with the pre-law advisor before deciding that I wanted to go to Central. So speaking with professors there and kind of saying, hey, this is what I foresee in my future. This is kind of the path I want to go along. How does this school, how can it help me? I think that was really valuable, meeting with professors from there, because you always hear in the legal field, oh, you have to go to a great university in order to go to a great law school. But really, when you look at it, pretty much all of the universities are the same. They offer, great classes, great extracurriculars. So in speaking with a professor, that really eased my mind. And I was like, okay, I know I can get the support that I need here at Central.
So much to unpack there, as I get curious. So, brilliant that you're looking at the college for a scholarship aspect, and that you sought that out and you got a full ride scholarship because you knew what that scholarship needed to get it. Fantastic. And let that be an encouragement to young people that that's a possibility. You don't have to go in a huge debt. You mentioned the pre-law fraternity and also something in high school. Was there a high school kind of group for pre-law kids? Tell me about that.
So in my high school actually had 2 different law classes, so I was able to take those as extracurriculars. So there wasn't like a group or anything, but they were classes that I was able to take to kind of get a little insight.
That's great. I also want to point out to young people and school counselors that are on this, that she took the initiative to talk to the law professor and ask those questions about if it's going to be a good fit. Because that's one of those big myths, and I'm going to ask you more about myths around this occupation, is that you do have to go to those prestigious schools somehow. And no, that's not true. Like you said, getting a solid undergrad for free just set you up for the next level. So tell us any other kind of around that subject of myths about school selection that you want to help just break right now for young people.
Yeah, so I think the beauty of young people these days is by the time you want to apply and you're thinking about going to law school, the law school admissions test hopefully is going to soon be non-existent. I think that's a huge barrier to people, not only financially, but some people just naturally aren't good test takers. That by no means says anything about how they would do in their career. So I think that's a positive for young people now. They can try to avoid some of those tests. The bar, some places are not requiring the bar exam anymore. But I think the biggest myth is that you have to go to a top 10 law school in order to have a great career. And that's not true at all. Certainly for some jobs, if you want to be a Supreme Court justice, they look at the Ivy Leagues. But for most jobs, they really look at what you did in law school. If you go to a top 10 law school but don't really do anything, that's not going to help. They look at the extracurriculars and they look to who you are as a person. They want to work with someone who is motivated, passionate, excited about what they're doing, and is able to converse with people. So I would say that's the biggest thing. They really pounded it into our head. You have to go to a top 10 law school. I actually had a professor in undergrad say, well, if you want to be a mom, you have to decide between, going to a top 10 law school where you really wouldn't focus on being a mom, or go to a lesser school where you could be a mom. And it's like, no, you can have both. So I think that's a huge myth that came with going into the legal field.
Thanks for that. And we had mentioned that test that traditionally you've had to take, that's called the LSAT, correct?
Correct.
SAT. And what I'm
Yep.
hearing you say is that some colleges are starting to go away with that.
Yeah, a lot of law schools now are not requiring that anymore. And there's, after COVID, I think that was really the thing that sparked it. There had been talks and discussions about it, but that's really like what spurred it. And you'll see a lot of schools now don't require the LSAT.
And then the bar exam, you said some of the criteria is changing. This is hot off the
Yeah.
press, people. I'd not heard this stuff. This is
Yeah,
great.
so Michigan just became part of the UBE, which is the Uniform Bar Exam, which when I took it, it wasn't. So when I got sworn into the Michigan bar, it was only valid for Michigan. Now, if someone were to take the Michigan bar, they can practice in like the other 32 states that also are part of it. So that's a new change that just happened a year or two ago, and provides more opportunities if people want to, work in other states, because that is one thing in the legal field is you have to be licensed in each state you practice in. So that can, depending on what school you go to, if you you want to stay in Michigan. I knew I wanted to stay in Michigan. I wasn't really focused about going anywhere else. To me, it wasn't a big deal going to a law school outside of Michigan because I knew I wanted to stay here. Some people who want to move, they may think, okay, let me go to another law school where I can focus on their laws. But there's always been talks about getting rid of the bar exam. The LSAT is slowly happening. The bar exam's still here, but the beauty is now, if you take the Michigan one, you can practice in a bunch of other states as well.
That's fantastic. I hope some young people watching this are like, wow, that's great. Someone in the chat's asking if you could name those high school classes you got to take again.
Yeah, so I think they were just called Law 1 and Law 2. I went to Harrison High School in Farmington Hills. Sadly, it's no longer around, but it was just Law 1 and Law 2. We actually did a mock trial in Law 2, so that was really cool. There was someone that was a prosecutor, someone that was a defense attorney, and through that class, we went to a law conference that had law enforcement and other people there that could just speak to it. So it did provide us, out of the classroom opportunities as well.
That's great. And again, you were so focused as a young person, you knew that you wanted to take those classes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you graduate from CMU with no debt. Fantastic. And now it's time to choose your law school, and you want to stay in Michigan.
Yeah.
What was the process like? What would you want young people to know about that?
I think connecting with people in your undergrad is really important, because one of the things law schools require are letters of recommendation. So at Central, one of my majors was philosophy, and it was a smaller department. So I had the same professors for a lot of my classes. So I was able to form that bond with them, and they got to know me on a more personal level than besides just, another student in my class. So that was really helpful, and that they were able to write really good letters of recommendation. I didn't feel awkward asking that professor for one because, ooh, do they really know me? I don't know. So that's something that I would definitely keep in mind as you're going through. And even high school, stay in touch with your teachers, stay in touch with your counselors. I had my high school Spanish teacher, who I had 3 out of the 4 years, write a character letter for the bar exam, because you have to do the, test portion, but also you have to pass character and fitness, where they do a whole background check on you, and they require character letters. So I reached out to my high school teacher. So establishing those relationships and maintaining them, I think, is really important. And then scholarships as well in law school. I was able to get a full ride to Michigan State, which is one of the reasons I got there. And the weight off my shoulders of graduating law school without debt really has allowed me to do so many more things in my life. And I'm not saying, you can't do things if you have to take out student loans, because that's the reality of America. A lot of people have to do it, but there's so many opportunities. I think people are like, oh, I'm not even going to look at that school, but they may have a really good scholarship. Again, I knew I wanted to stay in Michigan. Another thing I looked at for law schools was Michigan State had what's called the Trial Practice Institute. It's a 2-year intensive program for people that know they want to do litigation, and it's very hands-on. There's a mock courtroom at the law college. They also had a bunch of clinics where you could get real-world experience, not just reading from a book. You could work with people. So I was in the civil rights clinic. We represented prisoners in the state of Michigan. And those hands-on experiences are what I really was looking for, because, reading through a book about laws from the 1800s, like, yes, you need that foundation, but the hands-on experience, that's how I learn best. And that's something that I really looked at when applying to law schools.
It's interesting because, when we talk about health careers, we encourage young people to go to schools and have hands-on activities, but I never really thought about that with law. So I just feel like that's such a great takeaway too, to really investigate the law school and if it's going to be the right style of learning, like you were saying.
Yeah, a lot of law schools have various clinics. They have moot court classes. If you want to do like entrepreneurship, they have entrepreneurship clinics. So it's not just like criminal law and everything else. There's a bunch of different kinds and a bunch of different things that law schools offer that I think people don't realize.
And I'm thrilled that you're our guest today to give us those insights. So that's fantastic. I do want to drill down a little bit though, because you got 2 full ride scholarships. I want you to inspire some young person right now. Like, what does it take to get these things?
Yeah, I think it just it takes someone who is like passionate about learning really. So for undergrad, it was a more intensive process. I had to go and do an essay. So everyone sat in a room and we got the essay question, you know, right there at the time. We didn't know beforehand. And then we had to write the essay, and then I made it to round 2, and round 2 essentially was kind of like insight into how I would benefit Central by going there. So I talked about all the things that I wanted to do, you know, the different extracurricular activities. So that was more intensive. For Michigan State, the scholarship I received was based off my GPA and my LSAT score. So that was, it took a lot. You know, I took the LSAT multiple times, but it was really, and I didn't pay for a class. So, you know, I know a lot of this is cost prohibitive, but there's a lot of free resources online. And if you, I think another good thing about undergrad was being part of the pre-law fraternity. So a lot of people that had graduated before me were in law school. So I got to ask them, hey, you know, any tips to help me study for the LSAT? Any tips, you know, for applying to law school? Can you edit my mission statement and my letter to get into law school? So it really gave me a, group of people that again were like-minded, but also were willing to help me and give me insight. They gave me their old LSAT books to study for and stuff. So surrounding yourself with that. But that was able to allow me to, you know, get a scholarship at MSU because it was based off my GPA and my LSAT score. But I was telling people the other day, there's scholarships out there for everything. There's scholarships out there for being left-handed. You know, it's just it's going to take some time to look and find these things, but I think there's a lot of unused resources that people can tap into, and then that will allow them to experience, you know, college and go on in their career.
Well, we're definitely going to get into what your daily work is like, but you had mentioned, and I need to clarify this, your undergrad, you said more than one major, so philosophy was one.
Yes, I double majored in philosophy and political science. I was going to minor in political science, but then it was only like 2 more classes to double major. So I was like, I might as well. So yes, those 2. But again, with the knowledge that I wanted to go to law school, I may have picked something else if I wanted a gap year and wanted to explore a different career. But I did those 2 majors because I knew that would best help me for law school.
Yeah, and just knowing your classmates at law school, did they have varied undergrads? I just want young people to know that that's okay.
Yeah, my roommate in law school, her undergrad was electrical engineering. So law schools actually love taking people with various backgrounds. They don't want the same, you know, to pump out 50 of the same lawyers. They love people with medical experience, you know, hard math, hard science experiences. And another beautiful thing about law school is a lot of people are in their second or third careers. So there were a lot of people who were like, I'm going to try something else. And then they did that, you know, they were a teacher for 10 years, they were a nurse for 10 years, and they're like, I now want to go to law school. And they were able to, because it's a lot of law schools have night programs, part-time programs, online classes now after COVID. So they really do benefit people who may be looking at their second or third careers. But that also like opens you up to meeting all these people who have different experiences. So that's really awesome. They always say in orientation, like, you know, the person next to you could be your boss. You never know because you're surrounded by so many different people.
That is great. So great. So let's focus on, obviously people can look up what an attorney does on these career websites, but what is your typical day? And you said you focus on the defense side. So give us kind of a sample day for yourself.
Yeah, so my firm, we only do criminal defense. So we represent people who are charged with misdemeanors, or felonies. We do both state cases and federal cases. So really the beauty about being a lawyer is your day to day, like my kind of law is different. So I don't have to sit and do the same thing over, I can get my brain a little bit to work. So for example, this morning I had court, but it was via Zoom. So I didn't have to go anywhere. I can wear jeans on the bottom. And that's another thing about COVID is, Zoom court became a thing. So some days I will have court in person that I have to go to. A lot of being a lawyer is writing. So a lot of it is writing briefs or writing motions, doing research for those. And then the other aspect is like clients. So you're working with clients. I always, they call us counselors for a reason. So we're counseling a lot of people. The people who come work with us, they're often dealing with like the worst time of their life. So it does take, some humanity and some empathy and, having a phone call, easing their nerves, answering any questions they have. We may need to go, if our client's in prison, go visit them in prison. So every day is, it's the same, but it's different, which I like because you don't get stuck in the same rut. You're out going to court. I'm, for 3 hours, I'm going to focus on writing this brief that I have to get submitted. So that's a lot of what my typical day is like.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Just as a tidbit, I hear that you can, just like in a courthouse, you can go sit in a courtroom and just observe. You could do that with Zoom court too, right?
Yep. So a lot of judges have their courtrooms on YouTube. And that's what I would do when I was a younger attorney. So I graduated law school in 2019, passed the bar that same year. So I really only had about 6 months of, in person before COVID. And the good thing about in person was I could watch all of the attorneys, experienced attorneys before me, see how the judge handles different cases. And that eased my like imposter syndrome. So then when we weren't going in person, I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to watch these attorneys so I know what a judge is like? And then I would just go on the judge's YouTube and you can watch, their docket from yesterday, from a week ago. So you can see different types of cases. I strongly recommend that. And the YouTube aspect of it makes it a lot easier now for young people to go look. Some judges, took down their YouTube channel now that most are back in person, but a lot do have them on YouTube. And you can see how hearings are held. You can see how attorneys act. And I still like that for myself too, because I'm in my 4th year, going into my 5th year, but I still feel imposter syndrome sometimes. I think that's natural. It comes, just more practice and more experience. But yeah, I love watching, the judges on YouTube and seeing how other attorneys do things.
Yeah, that's great for young people to know that. And school counselors, you can recommend that as a kind of a job shadow kind of experience. What is your favorite part of your day, Marisa? And then the worst part about being a defense attorney?
Yeah, so my favorite, it's probably both ends. So the firm I work at is really great about letting us volunteer and do pro bono work. So I've always wanted to work and help exonerate innocent people who were wrongfully convicted. That was like my passion project. And the firm I work at, we work a lot pro bono. We team up with the Cooley Innocence Project and the Michigan Innocence Clinic to support them. And so, in the last 6 years, we've exonerated 6 people, which is like almost unheard of. So seeing them be released from prison for being in there for decades for something they didn't do, that like is easily the best part of the day. But then also, that works vice versa. The worst part is having to, we often have to give bad news. We deal with very serious subject matters. And we understand that, our client is accused of something, but on the other hand, someone, may have been the victim of a crime and they're experiencing that as well. So it's just a very heavy subject matter. And if you don't take time to like focus on your mental health and have that work-life balance, it can, get overwhelming because we are dealing with such heavy topics.
Yeah, that life, family balance and mental health. What are some of your strategies to deal with that?
Yeah, so each person is different. My boss, he's very strict, like works at work. The minute I go home, I'm not touching work. I don't work that way. I still do work when I go home, but I carve out time for things that I like. So I'm, every 2 weeks I like to get my nails done. That's something I have on my calendar. So I know it's like, okay, this is kind of self-care. My family's like, hey, let's on Saturday we went to Frankenmuth. I was like, okay, cool, put it on my calendar. So it's just like being intentional about carving out time. You know, sometimes we have a deadline coming up or we have a trial starting. Sorry, like I have to really focus, but just really trying to take that intentionality and that time to carve out things that you enjoy. If working out is something that you love to do, you know, every day I'm going to work out at 6 and then I can go back to doing work. So just making sure that you carve out that time.
Great. So we have just a few minutes left, and some of the qualities I've heard you talk about during our time together is having that humanity and empathy, that you're a people person, you have that passion, you're driven, you're focused, you're a good writer at some level because you have to do a lot of writing.
Yes.
Anything else you'd like to add as kids are starting to self-assess? I mean, do you have to have a really good memory? It seems like that would be a speed reader. What are some other qualities?
The beauty of the internet is that a lot of times you have that with you. So we'll have our computers in court. If we're like, hey, I can't remember the statute, you can just look it up. So not so much memory, but I think thinking outside of the box and kind of being analytical. And it's like, okay, how can we, I mean, my job is to literally poke holes in the government's case. So what are some ways that we can poke holes and just be creative? I never, you know, people think of lawyers and they don't necessarily think of like creativity, but there's a lot, you know, if you have a a brain where you love imagining and, you know, coming up with stories, that's great because we need theories of the case. We need to poke holes. How did this person get from A to B? So I think that's another skill that's kind of underlooked as an attorney.
I love that. I hope the school counselors and young people are catching that. It's fantastic. Somebody in our group wants to know if you could do anything different, what would it be, if anything, or is it proven to be what you hoped as a young child?
Yeah, I honestly don't think I would do anything different. One thing I did want to hit on is when you're in law school, there's things called on-campus interviews. It usually happens after your first year. They're preparing for your second year summer. So I guess I would do this different. All of my friends were getting these big law firm jobs where, you know, you make a lot of money and you are at these huge firms that have national recognition. So I felt like I had to do that too, even though I always knew I wanted to do like criminal law and criminal defense. So I did a bunch of interviews with firms that, you know, I knew I really didn't want to work there. It was business law, looking at contracts. And I think they could see through me because they're like, you have a lot of criminal stuff on your resume. Like, are you sure you want to do this? And I didn't get any of those jobs. So as my friends were getting jobs, I was getting rejected. I felt really down about myself. But one of the things I like want to portray is that follow and do what you're passionate about. Don't do what you think you have to do just because your peers are doing it. Oh, everyone wants to be in a big law firm doing business law, so I feel like I have to too. No, follow your passion. It's okay if everyone's doing something, but that's just not for you. So I did a lot of interviews and faced a lot of rejection. I think that's good, you know, in life just to get used to that, but I probably would not do a bunch of those interviews and callbacks when I knew it was a place I didn't really want to work at.
And you know, good recruiters will see through that. And
Yep.
so good for them, even though it made you feel bad, but they could tell that you were not, they didn't want to put you in the wrong spot.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Well, in our final 2 minutes, that was you've given some great wisdom and insights. It's been amazing. Anything you'd like to just finish up with these young people to let them know as they're thinking about this as a possibility?
Yeah, I think it's okay if you don't know what you want to do. Like I said, I'm the exact opposite. I think of a lot of people who just went, you know, straight forward on my path. There's a lot of people who took gap years that I know between undergrad and law school because law school is expensive. If you can't get it, and it's a lot of, you know, it's hard work. So you want to be sure that that's something that you want to do before, you know, you get involved in it. So take a few years after undergrad, you know, explore a different career. It's never too late to go to law school. And you want to be sure that's something that you want to do. So that's probably what I would leave people with.
I think that's great. Well, you've been a wonderful career mentor today, Marisa. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.